Well, I'm never going to look at this scene the same way again.
I'm melting! Melting! Oh, what a world! What a world!
It's finally here, guys. Wicked for Good. John M. Chu returning as the director. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande return once again, with most if not all the main principal actors from the previous film. Elphaba is now starting to fully embrace her Wicked identity as people see her as it's being portrayed by the Emerald City government, all the while dealing with certain events that we know from the original Wizard of Oz story and how it all culminates into what exactly turns out to be, if you're familiar with the play or not, maybe some twists or turns that catch you off guard. At least some of them caught me off guard because it really helped that I didn't see the play and I had no clue really what to expect. Although there were a couple times where I went, is that who I think it is, or is that going to happen this way? And in some cases that exactly turned out to be what happened, but I'm kind of getting ahead of myself right now. If you've seen my review of the first Wicked from last year, I was completely blown away by how so well done it was. The first half I thought was pretty good, then the dance scene happened where Elphaba and Glinda, or Galinda, who cares with the name at this point? It's that moment together that made me fully get on board with it all. And clearly there was more stuff to come as the movie ended on a cliffhanger. And to be honest, with a movie that's so well received the way the first Wicked was, any sequel that comes after this is bound to be littered with some sort of issues. Wicked for Good was in a really tough position because it had to tie in all the events of the original Wizard of Oz while also concluding what was established the first time around. We're just gonna get right to the point with all the spoilers and all. Well, maybe not everything, but there's a couple of things that I'd like to discuss because there's a few things that I had no clue were coming. And like I said, it also helped that I didn't see the play, but I can't really talk about this without going full on spoilers. And I thought about doing a separate video like that, but in this case, no, I feel like I have to. So if you don't want to know, I gave you the warning. Don't say I didn't. I'm not the first person to say this, but Wicked for Good is definitely not on the same level as its predecessor. But does that mean it's bad? Absolutely not. I don't think it is. And after listening to Sean Chandler's review, I basically got an idea of what people are saying. And I don't really like to judge a book by its cover, not to get too deep into this side of the conversation. Sean Chandler is kind of like the bellwether for me on what the consensus is on said movie or television show or a video game, because sometimes he does talk about video games. Dan Murrell, I would say, is in that similar category. After listening to Sean Chandler, I said, okay, I don't really need to check out any other reviews. I know exactly what people are saying. And the tomato meter at this time, last time I checked, is 69% positive from critics, but the audience score tells a different story. That's a common criticism I've heard of the musical, the actual Broadway show. Act 2 is not as strong as the first act. So I guess in that way, in hindsight, it was kind of expected to have some sort of lackluster response. And I'm not blind to all the problems that it has. The tie-ins that it has with the original Wizard of Oz story feels a little too packed and condensed. Some of it I think actually lines up kind of nicely with what they had the first time around, while at other times it feels like it's just thrown in there to say, oh, hey, look at this. I kind of expected that to happen, and if it's in the Broadway show, I mean, it's going to come with the territory. And if you're one of those people who's still going to cry about Easter eggs and fan service, well, I don't know what else to tell you, really. One example I can think of is Elphaba's sister, Nessa, who we know as the Wicked Witch of the East from the original. We don't really get a whole lot of scenes with her as a Wicked Witch. I was expecting there to be at least a collection of moments with her where we actually get to see her embrace that wicked side of herself. I'm not really sure if it's the same way in the Broadway show, but we get a slight taste of that when Bach comes by to announce that he's going to go after Glinda. I mean, it's not really a shock if you saw the first movie. His heart really wasn't there with Nessa from the beginning. She reads from the Grimoire after Elphaba comes to visit with her, and when Elphaba tries to counter the spell that she's reading, it messes with him and causes him to turn into what we know as the Tin Man. That I kind of saw coming. It was pointed out in New Rockstar's video from last year of the first Wicked movie. The way he's introduced as he's leaning a certain way. What other character from The Wizard of Oz do we know who has that ability to do so? And seeing him in one of the trailers go, "What have you done to me?" It made me say, yeah, it's Bach. I recognize that voice anywhere. I will say this though, the transformation of the Tin Man I thought was very effective. To my knowledge, it's a lot more graphic in the book, and with this being a family-friendly movie, you can't exactly go in that direction. But the way he comes through the door by chopping it down with his axe, very reminiscent, I would say, of Jack Nicholson in The Shining. Here's Bach! He doesn't actually say that, I was just kidding around. And of course, with the spell being irreversible, it sets him down a really angry path. I wish that we saw more of what he was going through, because at a certain point when they all march off to the witch's castle, he becomes very bitter and angry about his predicament. It's a side of the Tin Man that I have never seen personally. If you're a fan of the musical, if you're a fan of the lore of The Wizard of Oz, it's not going to come as a surprise to you, maybe, if that's the case or not. For me, it was a different experience because the movie was my introduction to this side of the story. But cycling back to Nessa, I do like seeing how she feels conflicted now that she's in a governess position after her father's now passed away. She wants to sign this thing into law by requiring certain passports for travelers to go to the Emerald City, but she's afraid that if she doesn't, then she'll be viewed as no different from her sister, who's now being branded as this evil force in the land of Oz. And I guess those slippers that Elphaba was so obsessed over in The Wizard of Oz kind of answers that question for me, since it's all that she really has left of her sister. Because of a certain spell she conjures up from the Grimoire, Nessa has the ability to temporarily float in the air. I think she might have been flying in the musical originally, I could be wrong about that. But if she has the right type of magic that she can infuse in them, it has a certain type of power that nobody else can really have. Hence why she wants to go after Dorothy and get those shoes back. And there's actually a couple of songs that were created for this movie specifically, like No Place Like Home or Girl in a Bubble. I've heard some people say they're not crazy about the new songs. On my end, I actually don't mind the songs. They allow us to see the character's transformation, or at least another catalyst in their trajectory to where they end up by the finale. In the case of No Place Like Home, where Elphaba sees all the animals going down the secret passageway in the Yellow Brick Road, they all ask her, why are you still here when this land rejects you because of the way you look? And she realizes that, yeah, you have a point, but I was born and raised here, and I still believe in the idea of what Oz has to offer. The title's obviously a nod to Dorothy's famous line, there's no place like home. But what really struck me about that, and I didn't expect this to happen, was her reunion with Dulcie Bear, the one who raised her since she was a baby. Hearing her call out, Elphaba! I went, huh? And then you see her, I go, Dulcie Bear! Oh! And I actually had a chance a few nights ago to rewatch the first Wicked, because somehow I just missed it in all of the experience of the first viewing. It's perfectly understandable why Elphaba wants to protect all these animals, because she was raised by one. The only living creature that showed her some sort of love and compassion, something that she never got from her father, let alone her sister. There's not a whole lot of focus given to Elphaba. Whereas in the first film, it was mostly her story. This time, it's Glinda's story. In the first movie, I wasn't too crazy about the character. I found her to be really insufferable and obnoxious. Here, I think she's actually handled a lot better. And I think that's kind of the point where she has been through some things and she's forced to conform to what Madame Morrible really wants her to do. The wizard's really just kind of a useful charlatan to put on a show and give people a sense of community and union, whereas Madame Morrible is really the one pulling all the strings with the propaganda and influencing the wizard's decision-making. It's not unheard of with certain forms of government. We actually get to see a flashback to Glinda's childhood where she wants to be able to use a spell, but she's not able to, and then out of nowhere, a rainbow comes out in the distance, not by her own creation, but all the kids wonder if she actually did it, and she lies saying yes, because she wants to have the ability to use powers for good. Elphaba wants to have a similar impact too, but given her circumstances with her skin color, it leads her down a different path. And throughout the film, Glinda feels very conflicted about what she wants to do. She obviously cares deeply about her friend, but she feels like she has no other option, and this is the only way she could achieve what she wants, by being a pawn in Madame Morrible's chess match. For instance, when she announces that she and Fiyero were getting married, Elphaba shows up to write a message in the sky saying, "Our wizard lies," but Madame Morrible changes the message to "Oz dies," further cementing the idea that Elphaba is actually evil. But that's not to take away from the focus they give to Elphaba. I like seeing the goodbye or the last interaction she has with her sister, but it's only when Nessa gets killed by Dorothy's house falling on her. It's the catalyst for Elphaba to finally embrace her wicked nature. Along with Fiyero getting captured by the wizard's armed guards, realizing that he is basically a traitor to them, using a spell to hopefully save him from dying, which includes the number "No Good Deed." And, that song has been on a loop in my head for days ever since seeing this. As for Jonathan Bailey, who returns as Fiyero, similar to Bach and how he feels about Glinda, he doesn't feel the same way about Glinda as she feels for him. So when he reveals that his heart is actually with Elphaba, that's what causes Glinda to suggest the idea of going after Nessa's sister to Madame Morrible. And it's only after Elphaba releases all the animals that the wizard's hiding in a secret hideout or secret closet behind one of his portraits. I'm not the only one to say this, but that musical number, Wonderful, has a little bit of a similar tone from what we saw in the first film when she first meets the wizard, where Elphaba loses herself for a second, remembering all the excitement and joy that she had meeting the wizard. There's even a moment where we see Elphaba and Glinda holding each other's hands like this, swinging around, very similar to this moment in Titanic where Jack and Rose do the same thing. It's almost like we feel a sense of hope for Elphaba. And with the wizard being a showman or a charlatan of some kind, people like that have a way of drawing you in and making you think that, oh yeah, actually you're not so bad. But just like last time, there's this lingering feeling in the air that something's not right. And it's only when she discovers the animals in the cages that she's reminded of, yeah, can't trust you. And it's a reminder for the audience as well. And again, I realize I'm not the only one saying this, but the production design and the aesthetic of the entire picture, spot on, just like the first time around. For all the people who made all these designs, they deserve a huge round of applause. And I would expect this movie, if the first film didn't get any in that category, to have some sort of technical nominations. Sound design, music, cinematography, production design, art direction, and whatever. You could say whatever problems you have with this movie. John M. Chu still, I think, has a way of drawing the audience into all these characters, allowing us to understand their vantage points. A couple of scenes that come to mind are the No Good Deed number, along with For Good, which shows up in the third act. That whole number where she finally embraces all of the darkness that she's supposed to have, where she realizes that she's gained nothing from all that she's tried to do, at least on my end anyway, I feel the weight of it all. And of course, there's the Cowardly Lion that shows up for a handful of scenes. And I'm surprised that actually Elphaba recognized him, because if you remember in the first film, where that little lion cub in the cage was in the middle of her classroom, she unleashed all the poppies, causing everybody to go to sleep except for Fiyero, and he recognized her too. I mean, I knew after reading a certain Easter egg detail that he was going to be the Cowardly Lion, but it does provide an explanation as to why he's such a coward, because, well, Elphaba did put the fear of God into him. Obviously, not intentionally. Also, we get to see Dorothy. Not her face, though. We see her from behind or a silhouette far away. In this one, she's portrayed by a young woman named Bethany Weaver. I think I read the reason as to why they don't show her face. One, because we already know the story of The Wizard of Oz. We don't really need to see that played beat for beat all over again. And I think if I remember correctly, I read somewhere that they decided because of how iconic Judy Garland's performance was, best not to touch that. If that's the case, I wouldn't argue with you there. I like seeing her show up in the background, and when she throws the water into Elphaba, all we really see is a silhouette or her shadow, just like in the stage musical where all we really see is her from behind a curtain. Because again, we're not telling that story. It's all from the perspective of Elphaba and Glinda. I realize I'm jumping all over the place, but I have to say, Ariana Grande, she has won me over in this one. With Cynthia Erivo, she proved in the first film that she was a revelation, in my mind anyway. I saw her in Harriet, where she played Harriet Tubman, and I know she's famous for another movie called Bad Times at the El Royale. I'd like to check that out sometime, but I never got around to it. But with Ariana Grande, I never really listened to her music. I'm not really a fan. Nothing against her personally, but her music's not really my thing. If she doesn't get nominated for an Oscar at the very least, there's going to be some discussions from the Wicked fans, that's for sure. At least Cynthia Erivo got nominated last year, although it's a crime that she didn't win, but she at least got recognized by the Academy. We'll just go with that. And seeing the complicated bond evolve to where it is by the end of it all between Elphaba and Glinda, it's really, in hindsight, quite heartbreaking. All culminating into the For Good musical number. When Madame Morrible gives the wizard the idea to send Dorothy and the gang off to the castle to bring the broomstick back, so that way they can confirm that she's dead. Now, we all know why he told him to go there, because his advisor was speaking in his ear. Now, before I get to the musical number For Good, the soundtrack this time, I liked some of the new additions, as I said, in comparison to the first one, and I don't really like to compare. It doesn't really hold a candle to the first one because of how big of a surprise the first film was and how it felt like a novelty in my eyes anyway. But clearly, there was a lot of care and thought that was put into this. You can have your complaints and your gripes with it all, and I've already mentioned some of them. And you could say whether or not certain characters say or do things that kind of contradict what they did a few minutes ago. I didn't really notice too much in the first viewing. Mostly it was because I was in a really crowded theater and a lot of people kept getting up to go to the bathroom, getting in my way, so I didn't really have a whole lot of time to focus on certain moments. I really hate it when that happens, but that was bound to be an inevitability because of how popular this was. It was opening weekend, so I shouldn't be too surprised by that. I'm gonna try to watch it again at some point within the next week or two, because I'd like to see if I could catch on to more stuff that I didn't see the first time around. But yeah, I don't really like the soundtrack as much as the first one, but even so, No Good Deed and For Good, yeah, those got onto my phone at least a few minutes after the show was over. But Dorothy and the gang head off to the witch's castle with all the people from the Emerald City following behind, something that we didn't hear about in the original film. Glinda goes to warn Elphaba after she has her musical number of Girl in a Bubble, finally deciding not to listen to Madame Morrible's advice and make her own choices. And I know I'm doing a lot of sidebars here, but Michelle Yeoh as Madame Morrible, I've heard a lot of people say that she's miscast. I thought she was fine. Maybe not a great casting choice, but I think she gets the job done. I just got one word to say about Madame Morrible, though.
Diabolical.
But then the musical number For Good happens. I gave the original song a listen from Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel, had no context as to what was happening, at least at that time when I first listened to it, and I gotta say, I was a wreck. Even without knowing the context at the time, I knew.
This is gonna hurt.
I've
Heard it said that people come into our lives.
Similar to this moment in the Defying Gravity number, in a good way, the emotions are so raw that it's unreal. Even if you don't like this movie, you can't deny that about Grande and Reivew. But the movie couldn't help itself by adding insult to injury with this shot. When she closes the door, protecting Glinda from what's about to happen. Okay, I'm not going to be able to talk about that without crying. Guys, do you really have to add more fuel to the fire on this one? Ugh. Glinda's obviously distraught over her friend dying, but then she's given a green elixir by the lead flying monkey, who now is able to talk. And throughout the film, we see the wizard holding this green elixir, drinking from it. Glinda puts the pieces together, and it's revealed that the wizard is Elphaba's biological father. I figured this was going to happen after seeing the first film last year, and when I watched some of the clips online and rewatched it a few nights ago, when we see that one traveling salesman whose face we never see in the opening, who has an affair with Elphaba's mother, that singing voice is Jeff Goldblum. For anybody who has a brainstem, that's a pretty dead giveaway. But I was wondering if that was just going to be a giant red herring, and I've heard some people say that that was way too obvious of a reveal. For some people, I could see how that might make you groan, but that doesn't for me. Because I guess they have to treat that as a reveal for him, the wizard, when he realizes, oh my god, what have I done? All the stuff that happened in the first film and in this one, it's all because of him. I was wondering, though, if Elphaba was ever going to find out. But she never does. Can you imagine what she would have said?
You did this to me! Ah!
But it also explains why he decides to leave Oz, because Glinda can't live with the fact that he basically caused all this to happen. And this is more of her putting her foot down with all the people that have used her as a pawn. It's really when she puts her foot down with Madame Morrible that made me just go, you go, girl. All the words that Madame Morrible said to her in the Oz Dust Ball scene, Glinda throws it right back in her face. That is one of the best comebacks I've ever laid eyes on. Not only that, but we get to circle back to the opening of the first movie by showing her in Munchkinland when everybody's celebrating the death of the witch. But another step in her asserting her authority, she welcomes all the animals back into peaceful community with everybody else in Oz, honoring what Elphaba wanted to do all along. But okay, we've held it off for long enough. The big reveal that I did not expect to happen was that Elphaba is actually alive.
What?
We see the Scarecrow go back to the castle where the hat's laying on the floor, and we think, okay, what's he doing there? Turns out, it's Fiyero. She turned him into the Scarecrow. That's another thing that caught me by surprise. Another benefit of not seeing the musical beforehand. Picks up the hat, opens the door on the floor, Elphaba is right there. No joke, when she came out of that trap door, I literally went, what? And to rewind back to the No Good Deed number, I guess I didn't catch on to him being placed on a cross of some kind or a stand, but it was this shot in one of the recent trailers where she's touching the face of somebody with a green marching coat on. Seeing that shot in the trailers made me go, wait a second. Again, I know a lot of people were probably not surprised by that reveal and they found it to be annoying and so obvious. Like with Oz learning about his daughter being Elphaba, I guess they had to treat that as a reveal for her. But now that she's with the love of her life, she knows that she can't reveal that she's still alive. So she and Fiyero, who's now being branded as a traitor, go off into the desert to find some sort of sanctuary out in the wilderness. But not before she looks back in the direction of Oz while Glinda looks out into the distance, reminiscing about her friend. And the Grimoire starts to activate for her, which Elphaba gave to her during the For Good number. From what I've read in the play, Glinda doesn't know that Elphaba's alive. But there's a certain reaction that Glinda has when she sees the Grimoire open. I don't know for sure, but I read that as her thinking, wait a minute, is she alive? Whether or not that's actually the case, I really did like seeing that. That whole moment felt very, very bittersweet. And you know, for what it's worth, as much as this movie's getting a lackluster response from certain people, this was a cinematic moment from a whole year when we saw the first film right up till now that I am going to remember for a very, very long time. For these two movies to have the emotional punch that they have, or at least in my experience they do, I don't really know what else to say other than just well done to all the cast and crew. You deserve all the applause and all the credits and all the awards that you will ever get. There's a lot of cinematic moments and experiences that I can put this up there with. The first Wicked, I would say it's the best of the two, and I think it's going to go down as a personal favorite of mine within not only the last few years, but maybe even all time, depending on how I feel about it in hindsight in the future. And even though a lot of the connective tissue to The Wizard of Oz does kind of weigh the movie down, this one anyway, it's still, I think, a worthy experience. And if you feel like you have to complete the story, what else are you going to do? Outside of the whole money answer, creatively, did it need to be split into two parts? Maybe not. But still, to my point being a cinematic moment, the experience was totally worth it. There's plenty to like about this movie, and there's a lot to love about it as well. And if you're a fan of the original musical, odds are you're going to get a kick out of this one. If some of you guys don't care for it, that's perfectly understandable. Just try not to get too riled up over my take, because I for sure, and I hope other people felt a similar way, did not take it for granted. So that's all I have for you guys on Wicked for Good. Thank you so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie if you've seen it. Hit the like and subscribe buttons if you'd like to see more from me. And as always, see you guys in the next one, and have a happy Thanksgiving.